This is Shane Richie, one-to-one with Nikolai Foster. An absolute exclusive. Forget Parky, forget Graham Norton, forget Jonathan Ross. This is the chat show you want to be on.
All right then, Shane, it's amazing to have you here with us today. Thanks so much for joining in the Curving Conversation series.
Yeah.
Should we start at the beginning then? Do you want to tell us a bit about what life was like growing up in the 70s in London and, you know, your sort of influences and when you started to get interested in performance and theatre and all that sort of thing?
Well, mine started, like most, I suppose, performers or actors, I mean, it really did start, excuse me, in school plays. And where I went to school, it was a school in northwest London called Stonebridge. And it's where they filmed, you may be too young for this, but some of our viewers might remember. It's where You're welcome. That was where they filmed Police with John Alderton. It was a sitcom back in the day set at I think it was a comprehensive school. And John Alderton played one of the teachers. And they filmed at Stonebridge School. And all the kids were asked to be extras. And if you ever get a chance to see the opening titles, like you probably get them on YouTube now, you'll see me as a 6 or 7 year old, I may have been then, dangling my hands and feet outside the school railings, and the camera pans across on the opening titles. And I remember then, I have a vivid memory of seeing these grown-ups with these like bits of paper in their hand and just staring down, and someone shouting action and then putting them away quickly and then playing these totally different characters. There were some actors in particular, of course, John Alderton, I got to meet many years later through his wife, which I'll tell you about later. And that was my first introduction to being, I suppose, witness to television. And also where I grew up, it wasn't far from Acton. Of course, the BBC was there and a lot of the ITV studios. And there was always film crews in that area. And I remember them filming things like Doctor Who, anytime they did street scenes. I remember seeing bits of, as an 8-year-old, seeing bits of tape. And you had to stand behind the tape to watch these grown-ups pretend to be someone else. I was going, oh, I like that. Pretend to be someone else. And then they did things like Sweeney, Minder, of course, like I said, Doctor Who. And then I joined my local drama club at school, and from then I my interest in pretending to be someone else. And the first play I ever did, I think, was as an 8-year-old, was Wind in the Willows, and I was given the opportunity to play Toad of Toad Hall. And we all had to, at school, we all had to make paper mache masks, and we had to wear these masks. And I was like, but no one's. And I remember being so upset because, funny, I grew up in a women's refuge, and my mum used to run the refuge, so there was always children there. So they helped me make this paper mache green mask, and I remember being so upset, going, oh, no one's gonna be able to see my face. What is the point? I'm not Lindsay Kemp. And so I remember going to school as an 8-year-old, and the teacher going, why are you upset? I said, well, I'm doing all this hard work, and I've learned these lines, and no one's going to see my face, and I've got a mask on. And they went, all right, then, Shane. I said, why don't you paint your face green? All right, that's it. I'm painting my face green. I'm not wearing a mask. And all the kids that played all these characters had paper, and I was the only kid that just said, no, I'm going to paint my face green so everybody can see my face. And I suppose that was the first inkling where my ego was going to get in the way of my career. and then my dad, who was like in and out of our lives, he was either in prison or he was doing something, but he used to run clubs in London. And my earliest memories of going to them clubs were a lot of the cabaret acts. I suppose this was my love for not just being an actor, for being an entertainer. And I suppose the essence of an actor is to show off. And even though I was going to drama at school, I also, after school, would go to a place called Barbara Speaks Stage School. We couldn't afford to go full time, so I used to go after school and study there from about 5 till 7 o'clock. You paid some fees. Bearing in mind, I was only about 10 or 11. And that was my teaching, I suppose, into theatre. But as I said, my dad was running clubs. So I would get to see drag queens, comedians, stand-up comics, bands, jugglers, all kinds of these performers that would work at my dad's club. They were like cabaret clubs, not working men's clubs really. And he had 3 or 4 of them scattered around northwest London. And I would go there, help set up the microphones, help set up the band. I'd even, as a 10-year-old, I'd call bingo, or I'd get up and do the raffle, and I'd get up and I'd sing with bands. And my earliest memories are impersonating Donny Osmond and painting my teeth white for some reason, because I remember seeing Top of the Pops and Donny Osborne had really white teeth, and nicking a wig from somewhere and singing, and they call it puppy love as a 10-year-old. And then in 78, I think it was, Grange Hill come to film at the school I was in. I was at a school called Willesden High. And they said they're auditioning for certain characters, albeit we said very little, that we were going to be part of Tucker's gang, which of course was Todd Carty, who I was going to work with much later on in my career. But then I was, 13? And I'd already belonged to a local theatre company, professional theatre company called the Moonshine Youth Theatre. And they had a professional touring company. And I'm slightly digressing here, because what had happened then, from the age of 13, I'd do bit parts in Grange Hill when they were filming there in the summer. But also I managed to get permission from my school, which every credit to them. You'd never get away with it now. But I got heavily involved with the Moonshine Theatre at the age of 13. And what my school did, and like I said, you never get away with this now, Nikolai. I used to get up in the mornings, go to registration at Willesden High School, and then I would run, I think it was about a 2 or 3 mile run to the Moonshine Youth Theatre, where the director there was a lovely guy called Paul Vaughan Phillips. Sadly, we lost him during the AIDS epidemic in the 80s, but he was the theatre director. And I was only 13, 14, and I would get to the Moonshine, and then they would ring the school to say I got there safely. And I would spend all day painting sets, stapling scripts, making cups of tea for the actors, standing in, doing these scenes this was my introduction to, artists like Alan Bennett. And I was going, what? Alan Bennett wrote these wonderful monologues, and I would be hearing this wonderful text and these actors. And then they would go off and tour. And then I got involved at the age of 14 with TIE, Theatre and Education, which all allowed me to do. Then in my summer holidays, this small group of actors would take me with them, and I would go and do these plays in parks. We'd go to schools and do them in the assembly halls. And that was my introduction to being an actor, a real grassroots level. And then at in 1980, I was 15, and I was offered a place at the National Youth Theatre. I auditioned for the National Youth Theatre, and it's a real sliding doors moment. And as a child, we used to go on to holiday camps. We used to go to Pontins, and I spoke about this many times, and it's also in the book, still available, Rags to Riches on Amazon. and as a child, I remember going to these holiday camps and seeing these entertainers. They were called Blue Coats. And watching these guys, they would sing, they would dance, they'd get on the microphone, they were funny, and they would do sketches. It was very different now, but back then, and a lot of these Blue Coats, I remember as a child, were out-of-work actors. And they were rep theatre actors, which I didn't really know what that meant as a 13, 14-year-old, but I knew that me going to Moonshine, I saw the association. I went, and I would talk to them. They said, oh, yeah, we're out of work at the moment during the summer season or something, waiting for the next job, as we all are. And they would go work on a holiday camp. So at the age of 15, I got a place at the National Youth Theatre, but I also auditioned for Pontins, where you should have been 18. And I forged my medical certificate. They didn't have a passport then. And because I was born in 64, I managed with an ink pen to lose the 4 and change it to 2. So it looked like in March, I was going to be 18 as opposed to 16. And went to audition and was offered a place, seasonal work, at Pontins in Pakefield, near Lowestoft, as a sports organiser. Now, mate, anyone who knows me knows I'm not into sports, and I'm like, oh my God. I knew my way around a snooker table because my dad, would snooker and clubs and all that. And I knew how to do the odd little deal there. So it was just, I think about this a lot now. Now we're in lockdown, you tend to start looking back on your life and thinking about it. And it was a real sliding door moment. Had I gone to the National Youth Theatre, and I think at the time it was Paula Wilcox who was teaching that particular, and she was a big name, a wonderful actress and still is. And I think Phil Daniels was there, Perry Fenwick, and they'd all done this play called Class Enemy. I don't know if you're familiar with it. It was written by Nigel Williams, and it premiered at the Royal Court in '78. I managed to do that play after it finished at the Royal Court, we did it at the Moonshine Theatre, and that's where they saw me. And they said, "Oh, we want." I think it was '79. I did Class Enemy after it premiered at the Royal Court, and I thought, this is my life. I'm going to go to the National Youth Theatre. Bang! I've made it. But instead, I went to work at Ponsonby, where that summer I should have been doing my CSEs. So, I mean, sadly, I left school with no exams. Even now to this day, that's one of my biggest regrets. I'm not a great reader or writer. Yeah, I do love reading. And from then, I got a little stand-up act together at the age of 16. And of course, having the experience from my dad's working men's clubs, I had a lot of contacts. So, yeah, and then I went to do another play in the winter of 1980. But for some reason, I had this itch about getting on stage and having a microphone, and I wanted to be an entertainer. All the time, though, during them from 80 to 81, and I was homeless in 80, which is another story. And then in 81, in the summer of 81, I went back to the camps, and now I was 17, and my stand-up was getting stronger. I was funny, I was on the ball, I was singing, then I was singing with bands, and I was a young comic. I had a 35, 40-minute act, and all of a sudden, I was getting offered plays where I'd pick up maybe 15, 20 pounds for the week, and I'd have to, share gigs with 4 other actors. And then all of a sudden, someone said, "No, Shane, you could earn maybe £50 a night comparing hen nights." Now, hen nights, those that are not familiar, back then were basically lock-ins, but they were illegal and they were above pubs. So at the age of 17, 18, I was now working with drag queens and strippers and touring clubs and pubs, and mostly of all the places in the northeast of England where they hated Cockneys anyway, and they hated funny Cockneys, and especially Cockneys with dyed blonde hair and a ponytail, and my ears were pierced. And there I was working with drag queens and strippers, not knowing for 1 minute that 30, 40 years later, I would know the world of drag. So that's just like mind blowing, the sort of journey you're describing there, and you just sort of get this sense of how exciting London was at that time. You're sort of seeing things being filmed off down here, and youth theatres and all of that sort of thing. It just feels, the way you describe it is so sort of intoxicating and exciting, and I can really sort of feel it. Where were you sort of getting the material from? I mean, at the age of like 17, going into those clubs and as a stand-up, where was that material coming from? Was that part of growing up in the refuge, your relationship with your mum? I mean, you sort of have real challenges in your life. And you know what, Nicola, I'd love to sit here and say, I would sit and write gags all day, but I didn't. I was a thief. I would watch comics. I'd watch television. I would watch Robin Williams then. Dave Allen was a big influence. Jasper Carrot, Billy Connolly. A lot of these comics that were coming through at the time. I mean, bearing in mind, this was the early 80s. It was when alternative comedy was starting, but I didn't really have a foot in that door that was happening in London, because I was kind of more being drawn towards mainstream. In the mid-80s, I would end up working with people like Cannon and Ball and Tom O'Connor and Bob Monkhouse and a lot of these. And funny enough, Little and Large. Sadly, we just lost Eddie recently. And I would work with these comics. But I mean, some of the material I was doing then, my attempt at writing humour, I mean, one of the gags I remember doing at the time, because I was going, obviously like most 17, I was going through puberty. And I remember having a lot of spots on my face. I remember one of the gags I used to do was I'll do a gag about going to a nightclub. One of the gags was I turned up at a nightclub and it was £10 a head to get in. 150 quid it cost me to get in that club. That was the gag about puberty and about, talking about having sex for the first time. It was really exciting because I was on my own. And this was this kind of, and I was just talking about being a 17, 18-year-old. And then when that kind of took over and I ended up doing shows in my wildest dreams, it wasn't something that I planned, because in my heart, I was always an actor. But for some reason, the lure of money and making hundreds of pounds as opposed to pittance and coming from nothing, of course, I wanted nice things. So I ended up doing shows like Seaside Special, the Les Dennis Laughter Show, Live from the Palladium, Summertime, and all these big shows. Des O'Connor, all these.
And what was it like working with those icons, like, you know, Les Dawson and Des O'Connor? I mean, that must have been extraordinary.
It was interesting. I mean, because then I think Channel 4 hadn't started then. We certainly didn't have Channel 5. So you only had BBC One, BBC Two, ITV, I think, and yeah, before Channel 4 kind of lot. And if you did a show on, like, I remember doing Des O'Connor, I think it was called Wednesday at 8. It might be, I can't remember. And you did that chat show. And you, on the strength of that show, or the strength of Live from the Palladium, or a Summertime special, you could tour for a year. An agent would see you, and because I was this young, about this time I was in my late teens, I was like this young comic who looked like something from Spandau Ballet or Duran Duran. And I remember, you can probably see this on YouTube, I remember when David Bowie wore a pink bolero on, I think it was A Serious Moonlight. I went, that's it. David Bowie, he's wearing a pink bolero, I'm wearing a pink bolero. And nobody did. But back then on them sort of shows, it was very much like a DJ with a dicky bow. And I was very different. I mean, I was still buying things like smash hits, you know, and I wanted to try and be part of smash hits and represent the audience that I felt I was still a part of. You know, I loved Spandau Ballet. I loved Duran Duran. You know, I was a fan of George Michael. So could I look like George Michael and do stand-up? And I gave it my best shot. I don't always think it paid off, but you know, there's pictures out there where I look like I should really have been in a pop band as opposed to doing comedy. But then what was happening then? I got less and less invited to come and audition for plays, and that kind of fell away for a long time. Whereas all the time I was you know, yearning to get back on stage as an actor. But sadly, not sadly, I mean, no, because, you know, I had a great time doing stand-up. And, you know, I did tour America as a stand-up comic. And funny enough, in 81, I went and studied with a wonderful teacher called Maurice Kosloff in LA. And I did a 12-week course in method acting. And of course, Maurice Kosloff, those of us, he was part of the whole Stanislavski system. And I studied method, and I remember doing it, and I was 17 years of age, and I lived with this family who kindly looked after me while I was there, thinking how many times can I pretend to be a piece of bacon sizzling in a frying pan? I mean, it was real cliche method back then. Okay, Shane, we want you to feel the pain of this bit of bacon frying in the pan. Come on, Shane, let's feel the pain. Come on, let's feel that pain, Shane. And I'm thinking, I just want to go back and call Donkey Derby. and little did I know, decades later, what I learned through this method, sometimes it sounds a bit poncy, but I did bring it to some of the projects I did decades later, you know.
And so how did you, obviously, as you moved sort of through the 80s, the comedy career and the television profile and the presenting and all that side of things really sort of took off, and you know, you were sort of, there was a period where you were absolutely huge. I mean, then how did you sort of then get back into theatre and the acting side of things? How did you sort of bridge the gap between those two things?
It was tough. There's certain times, you know, there's certain times, certain nails in the coffin, they call it. And I was really handy with them nails. I mean, if I ever wanted to get back into acting, I was really doing the wrong thing. Oh wow. Those that remember, I did a soap powder ad, the Daz ad. Do you remember this?
Yes, I do, yeah.
I was the Daz man. And I was offered, and I'll never forget it. I went and did Grease, the musical. And this was back in 90.
It was in the early 90s. I saw it. It was the first.
But yeah. I knew David Ian. I mean, like David Ian is now an impresario. But back then, he was part of a variety act called Boys Will Be Boys. Do you know about this?
No, I don't.
David, because I'm about to spill the beans on you here now, mister. Yeah, me and David worked together in the 80s. We would do the cabaret circuit, and he was a part of the singing duo. They were like the cabaret version of Wham. There was him and Tim Clark. And they would do covers, and you know, David was, I suppose, still is he was a great singer, and he did musical theatre. Anyway, we become friends. And in 92, he said to me, he said, late 92, this was, we were friends. And he said, oh, we're about to do a musical, Grease. Now, we talk about Grease now. And yeah, you know, everyone's done Grease. It's constantly touring. But back then, no one had done it. And bearing in mind, no one had done the movie version.
Mm-hmm.
And we take it for granted now. But the movie, as we know, came out 77, 78. It was a play stroke musical before it was ever a movie. And so he said, and I know for a fact, him and Paul Nicholas had done a deal with Robert Stigwood, who was the producer of the movie. And for the first time in history, they were going to put the movie version on stage. And I was like, David, come on. I'm your Danny Zuko. And he went, no, Shane, no. I went, why? He said, you've not done musical theatre. I said, it's rock and roll. What's the matter? I can sing them songs. It's nothing wrong. And he said, no, we've already cast someone. And I went, who have you cast? He said, we've got Craig McLachlan. I went, what, Henry from Neighbours? Shut up. He said, yeah. He said, because he'll pull in an audience. And it was kind of like, okay, I can... You know, we take that for granted now, you know, maybe using a soap star or a TV star or a recording star to go and do shows. But this was, you know, bear in mind, Jason Donovan had been announced to do Joseph. And I'm thinking, oh, here we go. We're going to get a load of Neighbours stars coming over here, taking our jobs. So this before it got announced. So I knew Craig McLachlan was going to do this. Henry from Neighbours. I'm thinking, okay, heartthrob. It had a hit with Mona. Hey, Mona. And then I said, who's playing Sandy then? We've got Debbie Gibson. And I went, what, the ginger singer? She's the singer. America. I went, okay, that's not bad casting. I said, who else is in the show? He said, oh, no, we're going to get a load of experienced musical theatre. And I went, oh, God, okay. I said, just let me audition. He went, oh, Shane. I said, please, just, David, for me. He went, okay, let me speak to Mike Dixon. Now, we know Mike Dixon, MD, who went on to be my MD on my TV show because I owed him a big favour. So and I remember saying, now this is for anyone that wants to get a career in a business, it's all about preparation. Mm-hmm. So I prepared my audition. I thought, I'm not going to go here. I knew I could sing because I'd taken singing lessons. You know, I've always said when I was out of work, I'm always learning, applying something at the trade. I learned to tap, learn to sing, learn to play guitar, learn to dance. Always. Even now to this day, I'm always trying to learn something new. But back then, I thought, right, what Grease? I watch the film constantly. Right, I've got to learn to jive. I thought, I can jive. I can jive. Anyone can jive. I used to jive with my mum. I can jive. But I went along to Pineapple Studios and I remember seeing all these dancers and I thought, right, I'll take a couple of jive classes before I went to audition. So I had about 2 months before I was going to audition. So I went, right, learned to jive, did some singing lessons, brushed up on a bit of acting, a few acting classes. And then I wrote something. I wrote an audition piece. I thought, if anything, if I don't get the job, I'll tell you something, you're going to bloody remember me. So I went along and I auditioned, and I knew the only part I could audition for was Kinnicky. Kinnicky in the stage show sings Grease Lightning. In the movie, he doesn't because John Travolta sings it, but in the stage show, it was going to be Kinnicky. So I thought, right. So I turned up at the Dominion, 2,500 seater venue, beautiful. You got Robert Stigwood sitting in the stalls, Paul Nicholas, David Ian, Mike Dixon, and Arlene Phillips. Right. So I'm there. How old am I now? I'm about 28, 29. That doesn't matter. I can get away with this. So I've slicked my hair back, which is not too dissimilar to what it is now at the moment, to be honest with you. I've worn a leather jacket and I wrote this routine, which I think I probably lifted from my own stand-up. But I did it hey, guys, how you doing? And I just did this whole routine of stand-up about meeting this girl. Hey, guys. Let me tell you something. Now, I know you're out there, right? Bang, bang, bada bing, bada boom, bada bing. Routine. Sung a song. And they went, thank you, Mr. Richie. Thank you. And you know that horrible feeling when you walk off to the sound of your own footsteps. And I thought, I've done all right here. I think I've done all right. Heard nothing for about a couple of weeks. And then David Ian said, Shane, they've asked you back for a recall. I went, that's all I need. Just give me a recall. So I went in and I wrote some more material. And I you know, slicked my hair back. I looked even more like a greaser, like a T-bird. And then Robert Stigwood, I remember Robert Stigwood always sit there, like, he was a big Australian man who'd made the movie Saturday Night Fever and managed the Bee Gees. And he's sitting here, I like this guy. Who's this guy? He's he's quite funny. He's a funny guy. And I could see David Ian going, no, you don't know him. You don't know him like we know him. And I don't know what David was trying to imply other than he knew I wanted this job. Now, at this time, I was doing stand-up and I just landed a children's TV show called Run the Risk, which was part of Going Live with Philip Schofield. So I knew I had a bit of a profile on television, and there was talk of me doing a TV show called Win, Lose or Draw. It was a morning game show, but I didn't want to talk because I hadn't got that gig yet. Anyway, Arlene Phillips. Listen, Arlene, if you're watching this, darling, you know how much I love you, but you know how much you didn't want me to be in musical. And if you're watching this, Arlene, you know, love, you didn't want me in that show.
Did she have issues with your jiving?
Oh, mate, she just had issues with me. I think it was because she thought of me as a children's presenter, which I understood. And she didn't want to go down the route of getting somebody who looked like they'd failed on television. And I was part of the Also Rans. There was a little bit of that because I'd had a career on television. The summertime, all that 80s TV had gone. I kind of like, I was a bit of a, I suppose for want of a better word, a bit of a has-been. And so I did the Giant, and I learned how to count, basically. What, we're going to do this on the 4, and Arlene was on stage. Right, we're going to do this on the 4. Okay, Shane, you ready? Yeah, on the 4, and 1, 2, and I remember, and Sally Ann Triplett, who we've come to love, and who for me is an incredible performer. She was there at the audition as well, and she was up for the part of Rizzo, and me and her, we had a bit of a chemistry on stage. Anyway, cut a long story short, reluctantly, with Arlene, I was offered the part of Kaniki. Now came the deal. My manager at the time was a guy called Stan Dallas. He used to be part of a singing group in the 60s called the Dallas Boys. And we used to call him the Colonel. And I've never had an agent. I've always had a manager. And he was my manager at the time. And he said, Shane, you're going to have to take a big drop in money because it was going to be just a bit above equity minimum. And I'd gone from earning a good lot of money in stand-up around the clubs and theatres and some of the holiday camps to going to do 8 shows a week for very little money. And also, I would have to swallow my ego, which I was prepared to do because I was looking at the long game at this point. So outside the front of the theatre was Grease, Craig McLachlan and Debbie Gibson. And then there was part of we called it the Also Rans in alphabetical order. And of course, I'm at the bottom, Shane Richie. People even to this day went, well, you were in Grease, were you? And I was the original Kaniki. Then Craig was never a fan of the show. He really wasn't. I mean, we were doing the movie version. Now, I don't know if you remember, Nikolai, back in '93, it was the hottest ticket.
It was the first show I saw in the West End. We came down on a coach from Yorkshire, and it was the first show I ever saw in the West End. And I remember leaving the theatre on cloud 9, my tiny teenage
mind. How old were you then?
Absolutely blown. I must have been about 13, 14.
Right, I feel
great. And it was absolutely mind-blowing. And I just remember just it sort of being like this explosive dream, and then getting back on the coach, and it was raining, and the sort of, you know, seeing that iconic neon sign outside the Dominion, and all the rain and the neon, and just sort of thinking, goodness, I mean, like, I hope I can come back and see a show in the West End again. It was just incredible. It was,
and bless you, like, you know, David Ian and Paul Nicholas, it was a big gamble. And Robert Stigwood pulled off a master stroke, and I know this for a fact, that he bunged someone at the BBC, he bunged them a few quid, right? Because on Sunday afternoon, we were opening in, I think it was July, 2 days before we were due to open, the BBC put on a Sunday afternoon, which is very rare, the movie Grease. And the announcer went to coincide with the opening of the musical in the West End this week. Here is the movie that started it all. And they showed the movie. Well, whoever, you'd never get away with that now, but someone got a bung at the beat. Anyway, and the box office went mental, mate. And that was my toe into musical theatre. I did 8 shows a week. I worked hard, and I could see Craig McLachlan, his heart really wasn't in it. He had a blonde perm. Occasionally, a couple of shows he didn't do. The understudy would go on. And by this time, I'd landed Win, Lose or Draw. which was a morning show. And kindly, they let me out to do this TV show, Win, Lose or Draw, which I went to film in Scotland. And lo and behold, it was only a morning game show, but it took off. It was on at 9:25, and students would watch it 5 days a week. And then my profile started going up. And then we got a little whisper from the box office that people would saying, oh, is Shane Richie on tonight? And of course, the producers weren't stupid. Now, this was 93. Now, at the end of 93, I just landed another TV show called Lucky. Was it about 94? No, it was 93. The Win, Lose or Draw took off. And then I got to do a few more stuff on BBC, on Run the Risk. I'd end up hosting bits of Going Live, me and Sarah Green. So my profile was going up, and all the time I was still doing 8 shows a week. So then and I knew Craig McLachlan was leaving after 10 months. He'd had enough. And they would start to audition for the new Danny Zuko. So they brought in everybody who was around at the time. I think even Michael Ball might have come in then. But there was a lot of names, and they were bringing over stars from America, from Australia again. And all the time, while they were auditioning, my profile was going up, and I'm still playing Kinnicky. And they said to me, would I audition? And I said, no. I said, if you want me to audition, I'll audition in front of an audience. So they took Craig McLachlan out for 3 shows. It was a Friday and the 2 shows on a Saturday. And so I had for some reason, the newspapers, The Sun or one of the tabloids, when they were friendly, did this whole Shane Richie, if you want to go and see Shane Richie, they did this whole centre spread of me playing Danny Zuko. I had my family come over from the box office went mental. For these 3 shows, it went mental. And because I knew the show back to front, I did this trick where I'd comb my hair and throw the comb into the audience, which have now since become collector's items. But I knew every trick to play because I'd worked clubs as a kid. I'd worked holiday camps. I'd done theatre. I knew how to play an audience. And only with, you couldn't do this in Les Mis or Miss Saigon. You couldn't do this, in any other musical, but Grease you can. It's bubblegum, it's pop. It's a show where you bring the audience in and you can have a little cheeky wink of the eye to the audience. And I knew all those tricks, and I played them, Nikolai. Every trick I had up my sleeve, from being a blue coat, from being an actor, from doing stand-up, I played every trick for them 3 shows. And Robert Stigwood was in, I'll never forget, he was in the box watching, and I think one of the Bee Gees was in. I think it was Morris Gibb. No, it was Barry Gibb, because I remember talking to him about it on the one show. He was in the, and they come backstage after, and they went, oh, mate, this is yours. You've got this. You've got this. Before they'd even spoken to David Ian and Paul Nicholas and Arlene, he went, you've got this, mate. This gig is yours. Anyway, I knew they didn't want me to do it. But I knew they couldn't find anyone else. And by this time now, my TV career was going like this. I was hosting Going Live, Win, Lose or Draw, and I was about to land a Friday night show called Lucky Numbers, which was a big show, bingo show on a Friday night, tied in with the Sun newspaper. And I was about to do a soap powder ad. And I knew all this. And so my manager was, and the sad thing, David Ian, Paul Nicholas, they were going, oh God, we know he's a megalomaniac. He's out of control, this Richie. So that week, I knew they were going to offer me the job. And I said to them, and I wasn't sure if I wanted to do it. I'd played Kinnicky, I'd done Danny Zuko. The box office was still mental. They were going to recast, and I don't want to cast aspersions on anyone, but I sometimes didn't think they got the casting right. But anyway, I was going to do it with Debbie Gibson. I was fine with that. She was going to see out her contract. She had 2 or 3 months left. But they offered me it, and I said no. They're going, what? No, not interested. And my manager realized, and the whole thing about this business, you should never show your hand. Never let people know what you're up to. Never, I've learned this over a decade. Never show your hand. They did. I knew they had nobody after Craig. So my manager said, okay, this is what he wants. He wants this amount of, it was disgusting. The amount of money we asked for. I wanted money. I wanted a cut of the box office. I wanted a cut of merchandise. Also, you've got to let me out to do these TV shows, which of course would benefit the box office. Thinking they would go, not a hope in hell. And bless him, Glenn Carter, who I'm a big fan of, he was my understudy, and they did a deal with Glenn that he would go on anyway, I did the deal, and I ended up playing Danny Zuko in the West End for the best part of 2 years. all the time letting me out to go and do these TV shows. So the two went hand in hand. But mate, well, you know, there's something that will never happen again. I was in a great position. And from then I got my love back, not just for theatre, but for, you know, going back and being an actor again, you know. And then from that, I had the chance to go and do Macbeth for Channel 4, where I played Porter. And and it was funny how, you know, someone had come to see me in Greece and they went, you know, Shane, it'd be great playing the Porter. And I went, how do you get from Porter to Danny Zuko? And I didn't quite see it, but I think it was them trying to bring an audience.
Yeah.
The classics. You know, they had Greta Scacchi playing Lady Macbeth and Sean Pertwee playing Macbeth. And they thought, right, let's find a younger audience. And they knew that my audience were very different to a Channel 4. So that happened in the 90s. And from then, things were changing, you know. But that was my introduction to musical theatre.
Wow. I mean,
and I went the long way round, so I do apologise.
You what, sorry?
I went the long way round, but I do apologise.
No, it's hugely inspiring. And I just think, yeah, I mean, Greece at the Dominion, it was such an event. And I mean, all of you in that company, you know, you were saying the sort of also rounds on the cast list. I mean,
listen,
Glenn Carter, I mean, you've all gone on, whether it's to carve out, you know.
In that cast at the time,
careers.
In the cast was Tamsin Outhwaite. She played Patty Simcox. Ben Richards, you know, John Partridge. I mean, I was there for like best part of 3 years, and all these wonderful actors that came through. Samantha Janis, Lindsay Haitley, John Pub, Ben Richards, Tamsin Outhwaite, Adam Garcia. And I would work with all these people, and, you know, watch them go on to great things. And funny enough, because Tamsin left to go and do Oliver. And of course, you know, ended up doing some wonderful stuff. And then ended up in EastEnders, where we'd all eventually tell our tales sitting on Arthur's bench in the middle of our work.
And do you miss, because I suppose what's interesting, especially from somebody from a theatre perspective, playing a role like Archie Moon as you do over many years. I mean,
Alfie, you mean Alfie?
Sorry, Alfie. Oh my goodness, sorry.
Because you confused that with Archie Rice, didn't you?
But do you miss the sort of ability to keep dipping into a character in a long-running soap like that and being able to develop them and sort of keep finding new things with them?
Yeah, Alfie was an interesting character to play. When I first joined the show in 2002, I think it was, 2002, he was very much like me. I kind of dressed similar. I wore jeans, I wore cowboy boots, and so did the writer, Tony Jordan, who created Alfie Moon. But as it went on, as the long run, funny enough, I played it from 2002 to 2005. Then I only did 3 years, and then I left for 5 years and went and did Scrooge, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. I went and did The King's Head, Private, did all these plays and little independent films and stuff. But from 2002 to 2005, I mean, the character Alfie Moon, he came along at a time where Martin Kemp had just left, and there was a lot of alpha males at the time there. You had the Mitchell brothers, and there's a lot of heavy actors, a lot of angst. And in come Alfie Moon, who basically was the guy that looked after his nan and looked after his younger brother. And what Tony Jordan was trying to do was, he was a big fan of John Sullivan, who of course wrote Only Fools and Horses. And Tony's way of trying to introduce the Trotters into EastEnders. So he created the Moon family. And of course, I was, all intent and purpose, I was Del Boy, and Christopher Parker, who played Spencer, was Rodney. And of course, we had Nana Moon, played by the wonderful Hilda Braid. And it was all, I'll be honest with you, Nikolai, it was all about timing. The character coming in was all about timing. It was, it was a show that was getting double figures. It was constantly getting up there. It was #1 in the charts, in the ratings, 10, 12 million viewers. And so when I came along, it was funny how I've still got the critic in my downstairs toilet, where there was a TV critic. Once it was announced that I was going into EastEnders, this particular TV critic, I'm not going to mention him, said, now we have a reason not to pay our TV license. Shane Richie's gone into EastEnders, and tried to get a petition going to stop me going in.
Wow.
And it was, and because of people's perception of me, because I'd done the Daz ad, and because, you know, I was commercial, and I was happy to be a commercial artist. You know, I always said in my career, do you want to play in the Premier League or do you want to play in Division 4? Now, if you're going to play in the Premier League, every time you score a goal or a hat trick, you'll be cheered by millions. You'll be put on a pedestal. You'll be raised up. If you let in 3 goals, you're going to feel it. Now, if you play in the 4th division, you score 3 goals, few people might know about it. So I always wanted to play in the Premier League, but that comes with its pitfalls. And I understood when I went into EastEnders, people going, oh, what, that prat from the Daz ad? That guy that's got dyed black hair and going through a divorce, and, you know, the woman, it was all that. It was horrible. But, like I said, timing was everything. Alfie just went through the stratosphere. I mean, in them 3 years, you know, the viewing figures were incredible. The accolades were wonderful at the time. But they only wonderful for that particular moment. You know, here I was, just about to turn 40, divorced, bad skin, overweight, winning sexiest male. And I knew it, and I would laugh. And then when I won Best Newcomer, I was like, oh my God, I've been doing this for decades, and here I am. And I was never one for reinventing. I was very lucky. You know, I mean, I didn't get the job easy enough, Alfie. You know, I went to the workshops, but, you know, I prepared, you know, and it was that whole thing that I go back to when I went to study method in America. When it comes to improv, well, I had to do a lot of improv to get the job. I knew what to do. There was little buttons I could press, little things I could say or not say. I knew when to speak, when to shut up, when to step it up and when to bring it down. And you learn that. That's only, I suppose, experience. But in them improv at EastEnders, I was thankful for my time of going to do the hard work when I was, you know, as a young actor. But, you know, like I said, I was there from 2000 to 2005. In 2003 was a mental time. My autobiography came out, which I didn't want to do. I was forced to do because there was 2 journalists from a tabloid that were going to write the unofficial one. So I kind of got my back and I went, well, let me do one. I don't want to do one based on tabloid tales. So we wrote one, and that went to #1 in the Times bestseller, and then they asked me to do the song for Children in Need, I'm Your Man, which went to #1. And the big storyline then was Cat and Alfie getting married, which was watched by 15, 16 million views. So it was a mad time. You know, going even shopping and having a police escort. And I never took it for granted because I knew how fickle it was. And
yeah.
You know, when I left in 2005, and I remember going to meet Bill Kenwright to talk about doing Scrooge and getting the train from Denham to Marylebone and being stuck at Marylebone because there'd been a terrorist attack in London. And so, and things changed. And I remember turning around and going home and thinking, oh, London's going to be a very different place now. And it certainly was. And still is to this day. And then in them 5 years, I did some wonderful stuff. I did a TV drama called What We Did on Our Holidays, where Pauline Collins, John Alderton's wife, played my mum.
Oh, and wow.
We went to
That's
film.
A wonderful full circle.
Yeah. And Roger Lloyd Pack, bless him, he played my dad. And it was a great story based on the book. And yeah, we filmed that in Malta. Then I went and I had a 3 drama deal with ITV. I did that. I did The Good Samaritan. I did something else, Whatever It Takes. And these were 3 dramas. And then I went and did, I took over from Christian Slater and went and did One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, which I loved. And then I did a James McClure, American playwright, who wrote Private Wars and Lone Star. I went and did that at the King's Head. And then I was back as an actor. And then once again, got sidetracked. Sky came up and said, listen, we've got this idea for a karaoke show on Sky TV called Don't Forget the Lyrics. And I just went, you know what? Yeah, I kind of missed that side of the business. And I did 3 series of that.
And do you ever, I mean, it's an incredible career and you're a magnificent artist. And obviously we know you most recently at Curve Through your like devastating portrayal of Archie Rice in arguably one of the greatest and hardest plays to perform in today, John Osborne's The Entertainer. And, you know, the way you're describing all of this, you're sort of moving effortlessly through all of these different genres. And I'm like you, I completely believe you want to be performing to a large audience. You know, at Curve, it's all about getting our communities into their local theatre, them seeing big musicals, new plays, workshops, community events. It's about it being popular and challenging and pushing things forward. And I think, like you, we believe without people seeing it, engaging with it, there's no point doing it. But as you say, with that comes a lot of sort of snobbery and baggage. I'm curious, does that sort of still... what upset you? Do you still find it challenging to move through all of those things? Does that demon, that imposter thing say, well, you're not meant to be an actor, you're not meant to be this, you're not meant to be that? Does that sort of still prey inside you, or do you just sort of think, you know, to hell with it, I completely believe in my abilities? What?
It's interesting you say that. I think Curve, and certainly what you've done there, without blowing smoke up your perennials, you have to keep moving the parameters in theatre. And I understood when the producers of The Entertainer approached me to play Archie Rice, because I'm a commercial artist. It was interesting how critically, we couldn't have, the critics were phenomenal and the reviews were fantastic and the plaudits, and it was wonderful. The box office, as we were now, let's be honest about it, we were playing in some really strange venues. We went and played Cheltenham, great. That's where that play belonged. But of course, the producers got a bit, and I understand why, because everyone wants to make money. But then all of a sudden, you're doing something like The Entertainer at the Manchester Opera House, and you're going, no, that's the wrong venue. But I understood why they were doing it. And there I was, a commercial artist in a non-commercial piece of theatre in a commercial venue, and it was a bit like trying to put a square peg in a round hole. But since we've been in this lockdown, it gives you a chance to sit down and think about it. And it was interesting. Something came up. I was reading off on the Guardian and social media how Alan Bennett, they're going to be doing on the internet now, they're doing Talking Heads again, aren't they? And of course, they're getting people like Imelda Staunton, Martin Freeman, Maggie Smith, and quite rightly. But my argument is, why would they not ask someone like me? Why would they not ask someone whose audience wouldn't necessarily know who Alan Bennett is? And there's no reason why you should. And that's what I love about Kevin, what you do. Let's bring artists that you wouldn't necessarily see in this production and introduce them to new works. When I did The Entertainer, I knew it was a tough gig. As soon as I had to explain to members of people who follow my career what The Entertainer, when I did things like The One Show or This Morning, or I would talk on different radio shows, and people would say, oh, Shane, we're not familiar with it. I went, okay, that's great. There's no reason why you should be, but it's a John Osborne piece. It was set in the 50s, but we're set it in the 80s. It's about this comic who's on hard times. And this audience that wouldn't necessarily they would go and see me in Grease. They'd go and see me in Scrooge. They'd go and see me in a play with Jesse that they knew about, but The Entertainer didn't know about. And I think it was very brave of Curve to say, no, we're going to get behind this because we understand it. There's a whole audience that wouldn't know John Osborne. And I know you talk about, you're going to do the same with Joe Wharton. Hopefully that comes off. And it's bringing an audience that are not necessarily familiar with these writers or this particular work. Now, when I see, and I think it's great, and I love people like Imelda, Maggie Smith, these are Martin, wonderful actors, but they're missing a trick. Especially now, the trick is, why don't you ask someone like me? Why don't you ask, Danny Dyer maybe, but, who's got an audience that wouldn't necessarily know who Alan Bennett is, and say, you know what, let's introduce a whole audience to Akeborn. Let's introduce a whole audience to Alan Bennett. They've got their followers. We expect Martin to do Alan Bennett. Would you expect Shane Richie to do that? No. So we bring it up. And that's frustrating, mate, because I know.
And do you think that sort of goes back to perhaps some of those issues you sort of experienced early in your career, like, the idea of being cast in Grease and this sort of snobbery which persists in British culture? And I think the minute you smash through that snobbery and you take out all of those rules, you do really interesting collaborations like Shane Richie in The Entertainer, which was an incredible production. And as I say, you were absolutely devastatingly beautiful and brilliant in it. So, you know, it's sort of, we have to move beyond some of our sort of own cultural snobbery sometimes, don't we, to sort of really create the best work.
And Panto. You think about when I first did Panto years ago in the 80s, and I worked with Terry Scott, and I would watch these guys work their magic. And you know, through the 90s, it was, people would look down their nose at Panto. And then coming into 2000s, it was still the same. And for every credit, Michael Harrison, Nick Thomas, they changed it. They moved the genre around. They plowed money into it. And whether theatres like it or not, Panto, over the Christmas, sells out, and it enables theatres to go and do a Joe Orton play, to go and do an Agatha Christie, to go and do Alan Bennett, to be able to put on these small productions that wouldn't necessarily bring a large audience. But they've made money from commercial artists like myself that have brought, you know, I've just done Bristol at Christmas, 2,000 people every show, 2 shows a day for 4 weeks, sold out.
And for many kiddies and families, that's their first taste of theatre, and it's an amazing experience.
But then when it comes to saying, oh yeah, we're going to do this new production of, you know, The Merchant of Venice. Oh, wow, I'd love to play Shylock. I'd love to do Midsummer Night's Dream. Shame? No, what? The guy that just played Buttons? The guy that just played? No, don't be silly. So there is still that snobbery. Yet they're happy to use someone like me if they want to fill their theatre.
Yeah, well, you know that snobbery doesn't exist at Curve, and you are welcome.
I know it doesn't.
Anytime.
I know it doesn't, but you're one of the very few. And it's interesting how Panto has changed over the years. You know, you've got to look at the Palladium now. What do you mean, Dawn French? What do you mean Dawn French is doing Panto? What? When did that happen? So, you know, and I see it change over the years, and I see how the business, but it has to change. The parameters move, the bar raises, it drops again. But that's the same with TV.
Yeah.
TV, you know, you can end up doing this great drama. And how TV it's become instant now. There is so much of it. It almost, I mean, white noise is the wrong description. But I've just what, you know, Killing Eve. Everyone was talking about it. Are they talking about it now? No, I mean, I know it's back on, but something else is on.
Yeah.
Everything's become more like fast food. So sometimes you just need to sit back and go, now, hold on.
Yeah.
There's something things that we can wallow in. There's something that we can just, you know, wrap ourselves in. And there's writers out there. There's pieces of drama out there. There's plays. There's musicals out there that just, now let's just sit and wait. This is a great piece of work. This needs to breathe. But I do think, though, Nikolai, I think sadly, but there's nothing to do with what's happening at the moment with this lockdown. But I think pieces by John Osborne will see less and less. Unfortunately, I think, you know, Agatha Christie, you know, I mean, when I was on tour with The Entertainer, I remember talking to someone who was in Glengarry Glen Ross, and what a fine piece, David Mamet, what a wonderful piece of work. People, once you've got to explain what it's about, and then all of a sudden they would start things like Girl on a Train, calling it a classic. Now, I know we can sit here and laugh about it, and people will go, oh, well, I've seen that movie 5 years ago. I read the book. That's what's happening now. It's a classic.
Yeah, and I
know that audience that would remember John Osborne or Agatha Christie are sadly, A, not around anymore, or B, not going to the theatre.
Yeah, and I think that, you know, you could, I suppose as an argument, you know, Osborne's The Entertainer is a very challenging play, and your direction, and your production was a very intelligent attempt to try and give it a relevance for the 21st century, which it absolutely did. But I guess there's other Osborne plays like Look Back in Anger, which are very tricky and would be very difficult to sort of present today. And there might be an argument that there are some writers actually who they had their moment and they absolutely captured the zeitgeist, and now it's about encouraging the new writers. And
where's the new Entertainer? Where's the new Osborne? That's what I'm excited about now.
Exactly, and it's about creating a sort of landscape where audiences can see a sort of mixture of work and have the confidence maybe to go and see a new play by a writer perhaps they're not familiar with, or a writer from, you know, 50 odd years ago that, you know, there's a valid sort of reappraisal of their work, but it's about giving them the confidence, you know, to see a sort of wide variety of work.
And sadly, it's about trying to find investors that have got a few quid that may lose it, but are happy to lose it, but will put it out there. Because, listen, I don't need to tell you, you know, you can see it happening up and down the country. There's producers that are now looking for film titles. Mm-hmm. You know, as soon as Officer and Jack, and there's nothing wrong with that. You know, as soon as I remember when this was about 5 years ago, someone said, "Oh, they're doing Back to the Future." I went, "Oh, shut up." What? And of course, it's happening, you know, and every Disney title now, you know, the Disney, 20th Century Fox, Warner's, they've now got a theatre.
Yeah.
You know, and, you know, when you see what's happening on Broadway now, you had Tootsie, Mrs. Doubtfire, Frozen, Beetlejuice, all these big titles. And I get it, I understand it, but how do we bring through new pieces of work?
Well, I mean, with everybody's talking about Jamie, that's exactly what you have done. I mean, I know it started as a sort of docu-series on BBC Three, but it's a completely original musical. It's absolutely stunning. So tell us a bit about that. So were you touring with it before the lockdown started?
Yeah, I was. It was in March. We just done the Derngate in Northampton. We were with Sheffield, where the show was made, where we originally performed. We were there for 3 weeks. Sold out. We could have done 3 years in Sheffield. So then we went on to Northampton. And while we was in Northampton, we started getting little whispers about this little virus coming over from China. And we were going, no one thought nothing of it back then. And then when we were getting to the end of Northampton, people were saying, "Oh, we were hearing little whispers about shows on Broadway shutting." And this was all like within 48 hours over a week. And we're going, no, it's not going to affect us. And then I heard something, Daniel Radcliffe. I had a friend of a friend. Dan was working with Alan Cummins doing a play at the Vic. And he said he's not going to go on tonight. He wants to fly back to the States where he lives. So they're going to shut the theatre. And this was Monday now at the Alex in Birmingham. We got there, sound check at 4:30, done the sound check. Everyone's there on stage. And the producer, Lawrence, lovely guy, works at NIMAX, come on, and he's there. And I said, "We're going on tonight." Oh, he went, "Yeah, it's fine. We're all sold out this week. We're going to do this week. We're going to get through it and then play it by ear and see what happens next week." The following week, I think we were going up north. No, I think we were going to Brighton. Anyway, it doesn't matter because we never got there. Anyway, so 4:30, we've done the sound check, gone backstage. It's about 6:30. Now, those that have seen the show know I play Loco Chanel, so I have to underdress. So I'm putting on my tights, getting all my makeup out, my drag, my wig's there, and the drags are wandering around, and we're all having a right laugh. It's a wonderful company. And then we get a message: can the cast and crew please make their way to, this is 6:30, make their way to the stage. As I walked on, mate, I felt like I'd walked into the middle of a funeral. The band were there, ushers, usherettes, stage crew, cast. I felt hundreds of people just filling this, swarming the stage, all with their arms around each other. Lawrence, our producer, bless him, broke down in tears, starts crying and says, "The show, you all need to go home now." Like, what? There is no show tonight. The show will be off for the next couple of weeks. This is what we were told, of course, and that's how we felt this time. So there was a lot of snot and tears. I went out and got absolutely pissed, got drunk, just got on it, and then drove home on the Tuesday, and have been home ever since. And there are certain shows that will survive, and Jamie's one of them because it has such a great track record. And mate, you know, I don't need to tell. We were practically almost sold out for the 5-month run, and in August, September, we were going to finish up in Amsterdam, and and the movie was coming out in October, which coincides with the West End again. And bless him, Rufus Hound was supposed to open on the Monday playing Loco Chanel. He'd been rehearsing for weeks, and was supposed to go on stage that night, and sadly, you know, didn't even make it in the heels. So strange times. So hopefully we will get to Curve, and people will see me in my heels as Loco. And listen, you know how excited we all are to get to Curve. No one's ever been there. It's not like any other theatre in the world.
And what do you reckon once we come through this lockdown, these terrible times we're living through at the moment, what sort of role do you think Curve will have to play within its communities and its society?
Oh, mate, it's going to play a major part. Because Curve is, funny enough, it's not just about theatre. I know you go there. I mean, the amount of times I sat there, was having a cup of tea. I mean, it's got a wonderful restaurant area where you sit. The amount of people will go there and go, oh, what are you watching tonight? Oh, no, we're not. I'm just coming for a cup of tea. Oh, okay. I would talk to people that weren't necessarily there just for the theatre. Oh, no, our group meets here. Our Bible reading group meets here. Or our spelling bee group meets here. It's not just a theatre. It's where young actors would come together. And it's where we're going to meet. It's a bit like when I was growing up. We'd say, I'll meet you at Trafalgar Square. Now, Leicester, where are you going to meet? I'll meet you at the Curve. And it's almost become secondary that there's a theatre there. It's the strangest place if you've never been. And the fact, I could never believe when I first went there, I'd go to, and I was walking past where they were making costumes. And you can go and and do a tour. Listen, I know you put on one of them. Forget going to see any productions. Just go there and go and chat to wardrobe. Go and chat to the chippy. You see it all in front of you.
Yeah, it's a sort of theatrical experience in itself, isn't it? Just the act of walking around the building is quite a spectacular thing. A nightmare.
Listen, we were thinking it's a nightmare as soon as we come off stage to get to the dressing room in heels. That we were kind of thinking, how are we going to do this thing, guys? And we had fun. But what an incredible place. Mate, listen, I told you this before. People talk about Curve the way they talk about now the West End. And when any artist, and I speak personally, when a tour's been put together, every performer goes, is the Curve on there? Because it has to be.
Oh, that's amazing to hear.
Because it ticks that box and go, we know it's going to be cred because Curve's on there. And you talk about Curve the way we talk about Bath, the way we talk about Cheltenham, but also the way you talk about Palladium. So you've kind of, you found that fine balance between being commercial and also being an art house.
Yeah.
That is tough.
And there's no reason why the two things can't exist cheek by jowl. If you look at somebody like Andy Warhol, one of the greatest sort of pioneering artists of all time, but he was also popular. And the sort of, the everyday person would have heard of Andy Warhol at the time as they do now. And we really believe that great art can be commercial because, what's the point of making great art if people don't want to see it? And a pantomime is art. EastEnders, the writing, the quality of actors, that is art. It's all culture. It's all part of our DNA, and we should all be sharing in it.
Oh, there you go. Well,
and tell me, I mean, it's been an amazing it's been so inspiring talking to you, Shane. What ambitions have you got for the future? What are the roles? What are the projects you hope to be involved in? Because, I mean, you've done so much and you think, well, what on earth is there left to want to do?
I'd love to do. I might just put it out there and see what happens. I fancy doing Sweeney Todd. I've never done Sondheim. I'm a fan. Maybe we'll have a little chat about that.
Well, we are talking about doing Sweeney Todd. Every year we have a conversation about doing Sweeney Todd because we'd love to see it at Curve, and I think you'd be phenomenal. So
I'd love you to direct it. I think I know who we can get to play Mrs. Lovett. And I think we could put bums on seats and introduce a whole new audience that may not be familiar with Sondheim's work to come to Sweeney Todd.
Well, I think that's an incredible idea. I mean, that is an amazing idea. I don't even know if we'll be able to include it.
Oh, there's a contract. Here we go. Let's get it out. Get my people to speak to your people. And then bring it into town.
Yeah.
Bring it in. That's me sorted.
Well, that's a brilliant thing. I've shared that.
You know what? Only if it was that simple. But yeah, no, I would. And there's a few shows that, are opening, that are supposed to be opening on Broadway that may come over. But TV-wise, I don't know how I feel about television at the moment. Unless you're in something like a Killing Eve or a Line of Duty, there's so much on now. And of course, as an actor, I'd love to play some characters. I'd love to be given a chance at doing some of these wonderful dramas that get made. But there's so many of them now. especially in this current crisis we're in, we're binge watching, but they kind of feel like they're washing over. Whereas theatre can stay with you. You go and watch a piece in the theatre, you watch it live on stage, you know them actors are getting one shot at it to get it right. Unlike TV or film, I know from experience that, you know, you lose the butterflies, and I miss standing in the wings. I'll never forget when we opened at Curve in The Entertainer, I had that feeling of fight or flight. And, you know, them butterflies, that adrenaline that runs through you is better than any drug. And trust me, I know about some of them drugs. And I remember standing at the side of the wings at Curve and my mouth going dry. I couldn't speak. I could hear this Act One beginner's call. The lights went down and I could see the stage door. I knew where the stage door was. And for a split second, Nikolai, I wanted to run. I wanted to run out that stage door because I thought, I'm not sure I could do this. And that feeling is just, oh, fuck. And you don't get that on a film set. You don't get that on TV. And, you know, to do shows like, I don't know, Sweeney Todd, maybe, who knows? Maybe to stand in the wings and go, are people going to believe it? Me playing, well, let's find out. The overture starts, the lights go down, the music, the audience go, oh, there's nothing like that feeling. Nothing like that.
It's about risk, isn't it? It's raw, real risk. And I mean, thank goodness you didn't run, because all of us, it was just the most beautiful thing, Shane. And talking to you today, it's just, thank you so much for being so generous and open and just being so humble with your great talent and your body of work. It's just sort of been mind-blowing. So thank you.
Thank you for asking me. I mean, there's a few I get asked to do. When someone said, oh, Nikolai wants to talk to me, I went, oh, God, what have I done wrong? What does he want to talk to me about? He went, no, he wants to interview. I went, that is an honour and a privilege.